set, or is it a moving target? So whenever you say, and I've looked at this report, it says that by June, it was about June 2023, it was about 70.8% of the GDP. And the figure, the nominal amount was 10.278 trillion. On this, 5.4 trillion was an external debt. 4.832 trillion was domestic debt. Then they move quickly and they say, hey, let's clap for ourselves. Bam, 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 bam. That in February of 2024, it is now 67.2%. Arguing that we have reduced from 70 to 67. And then the nominal amount has gone up to 11.2. But what they forgot to say here is that GDP is a moving target. It is very difficult. You know, you cannot come in and tell us that, oh, if we add it as a figure, and that's why I was completely against changing of the GDP from a figure, you know, the debt from a figure to a percentage of the GDP. Mr. Speaker, understanding finance is the beginning of building a nation. But I tend to believe that sometimes we speak from both sides of our mouth. Because you say you want to help, yet at the same time, you are increasing on expenditures. Mr. Speaker, today, if you ask me, what is the budget of State House? The budget of State House, I dare say, is 50% of our budget deficit. It's about 364 billion shillings. If we really care about this country and we want to move this country far, and we want to come up with a proper medium-term management strategy that allows us to monitor our credit rating worldwide so that it is not affected, that's number one, Mr. Speaker. Second, so that we can lower down the interest rate. Third, so that we can make it affordable for credit and credit available domestically. What is the first thing we need to do? The first thing we need to do is to completely lower the cost of our day-to-day running of the house in the hill. I would be happy if the president says, today we are reducing on this budget. I heard him in Narok saying that he's going to cut on those spending, on all those parastatals. It is good. Let's do away with them that are obsolete. Let's not fund them. But also, you know, when you live in a glass house, you have to be careful. Because the budget of State House is unbearable. We are not able to manage it. So that's issue number one, Mr. Speaker. Number two, and I'm happy that my good friend, the majority leader, has just walked in. Number two, we need to be creative. And I heard the Cabinet Secretary of Treasury, and also my good friend, Madividi, talking about the new strategies that the government is adopting in terms of going for the Kyoto funds, which guarantees they give a grace period of about 12 years, interest-free. Why not become creative and go for those funds? Borrow the funds, which we don't have to pay so much. And in fact, I don't know the logic, and maybe my good friend Senator Eddy will be able to explain as to why we are borrowing 45% locally. We should try to borrow the least locally. We should try to borrow very little money locally and just borrow money outside. So we need to be very clear on our financial goals, Mr. Speaker. We need to be, I have to say, when credit is due, you have to give credit. What the government does well, we have to say, yes, the government is doing well. But when they do things which are not right, we tell them. If it is indeed true that we have paid off, you know, half of what we were supposed to pay in the Eurobond, I will say kudos. Because then that allows us to be able to manage our finances and set up our goals so that we don't overtax our people to be able to pay. You know, I was listening to my good friend, the senator from Nandi, talking about asking why should we be paying for KQ. I think it's important for us to be clear that a call-up debt has to be paid by the company that guarantees it. The government did guarantee. It guaranteed that it will pay up, and it paid. Call-up guaranteed loan of 88.2 billion, which relates to KQ. The government has got an obligation to pay for it. So we cannot run away from it. We have to ask ourselves, how do we manage it effectively? So, Mr. Speaker, it is important that the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury, my good friend Ndongo, seek approval from both houses when they need to borrow more. This issue of exceptional circumstances that we allowed in the amendment of the PFM Act, I think it's about time that we come back and really define what are these exceptional circumstances? What could they be? You know? So that we clearly understand. I think we might have rushed the amendment that we're not so clear in terms of the leeway that we give to the Cabinet Secretary. We need to give him a leeway, but we need to clearly define these exceptional circumstances for borrowing, so that at least we are all not taken by surprise. Nobody comes out and say, oh, you know, we borrowed to pay this, but we didn't know. When? How? So these constant reports are very, very important. Just like we're talking about today, in terms of what we require from the controller budget, I think Treasury should also be submitting, you know, quarterly reports on the debt, giving us analysis of the debt. My other point that I made, which I want to be able to talk about, is really to reiterate on this issue of cutting down unnecessary spending. And this cutting down the unnecessary spending should not only be pegged on, or should not only be on the national government, even on county governments. In county governments, and all senators here will tell you, there is a lot of spending in county governments which is unnecessary. If you open, my governor spends in a month around 16.2 million shillings paying for helicopter transport. That is money that could be, and then when you go to a hospital, there are no drugs. So you ask yourself, what is the logic in this? How do you go spending 16 million? And these are facts. And you know facts, the problem with facts, they are stubborn. Majority Leader, this guy spent 16.2 million. I can give you the figures now. The governor of Narok to pay for helicopter, but if you go to a hospital today, there are no drugs. Really, this unnecessary spending have got to be controlled. So we must cut down on that. And then, finally, Mr. Speaker, as I wind up, I just want to reiterate that this monitoring of this borrowing is very important. Because even though we want to reduce, right now we've managed to reduce it to 67% of the GDP, but just because the GDP is a moving target, it can go up to 80%. We'll be in serious debt. As I end, it is imperative, Mr. Speaker, that we try to create a good environment for doing business. I'll be very happy if county governments pay their debt when the debt is due. Right now, we are talking about a deficit of about 739 billion. If you look at county governments combined, they owe about 117 billion shillings. We need to be diligent in analyzing budgets, performances. This issue of relying only on the Auditor General to give us financial statement that gives us opinions, that it's adverse, it's a qualified, really does not give us a clear picture on how funds are being spent. How do you explain, Mr. Speaker, how a county like Nairobi can have pending bills amounting to 103 billion shillings in 10 years of devolution? How do you explain a county like Narok owing about 1.5 billion shillings, yet it's a county that is one of the leading in terms of on-source revenue? So we really need to change, and as we are bringing amendments to the PFM Act, the majority leader through the chair, we now need to look at how we can be able to put punitive measures to ensure that we control